Hey guys, it's Dr. Dai, and today we're trying to figure out what my exact atlas listing is. And yes, these are my x-rays, and we're trying to record this all in one go. So first we're looking at the lateral view of the x-rays because the only way you can determine the first of four letters of the atlas listing is from the lateral view. So the first letter is always anterior, and the only reason for that is because behind this here, the anterior arch of the atlas is the odontoid process. And so because of that structure, it's not as possible for the atlas to go posterior. So we always assume if there's an atlas listing that it's always anterior. So now that I have this line here too, this line is following the posterior line of the odontoid process. And the reason why we want this line is because it helps us determine the transverse line of the axis, right? So the only way we get that line is if we have a 90-degree perpendicular angle between the odontoid process and the body. So that's our line here for the axis, and then our atlas plane line is determined by the center of the anterior and the center of the posterior arch. And so now we're looking at our second letter, and in my case my atlas has gone superior on my axis, and so we have our first two letters AS. And how I determine that this is going superior is because the lines are diverging to the front. Now, if the lines were diverging to the back, then it would be instead an inferior listing. But that's not the case here. Okay, so now we're looking at my AP open mouth, right? And these are our dots of reference. And I'm going to show you guys this picture here. And essentially what we're looking at with this picture is we're looking at this area between the atlas transverse process and the inferior articular pillar. So here and here are our two dots here, right? And now we're looking at this point here and here on the axis. And so that is going to be our 2 points here and here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to connect those dots like we always do to determine our third letter, laterality. And so to determine laterality on the axis, we're looking at where the lines diverge. We can see that the space here on the right side is clearly bigger than the space here on the left side. And because of that, now we can assume that the atlas has gone to the right here. That's how we determine our third letter, right? So if these lines were to diverge more on the left side, then it'd be a left lateral atlas. To get our fourth and final listing, we have to base it off of our third listing, so our previous listing. So our previous listing was a right lateral atlas. So now we're listing the right side of the atlas, right? So we have to take measurements of the lateral masses here. So this is the measurement for the right lateral mass, and this is the measurement for the left lateral mass. And as you can see, these numbers are not the same, and the right side is actually bigger. And how do we determine if it's anterior or posterior? Well, it's determined by the size. And so because it's bigger, the number is bigger, it's gone anterior. And if the number was smaller, it would go posterior. Kind of like my hands as reference. If these were the two lateral masses of the atlas, and I were to bring this right one forward, right? Now you can clearly see much more of my right hand versus the left hand. And because of that, my right one is anterior and my left one is posterior. And so that's how we determine that rotation of that. And so now that we have all of those pieces put together, my final atlas listing is ASRA. So who's going to fix it for me?